Beyond the City by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 12. Friends in Need. "Now, Papa," said Clara that morning, wrinkling her brows and putting her fingertips together with the air of an experienced person of business, "I want to have a talk to you about money matters."
"Yes, my dear."
He laid down his paper and looked a question. "Kindly tell me again, Papa, how much money I have in my very own right. You have often told me before, but I always forget figures."
"You have £250 a year of your own, under your aunt's will."
"And Ida?"
"Ida has 150.
"Now, I think I can live very well on £50 a year, Papa. I am not very extravagant, and I could make my own dresses if I had a sewing machine."
"Very likely, dear."
"In that case, I have 200 a year, which I could do without."
"If it were necessary."
"Oh, but it is necessary. Oh, do help me like a good, dear, kind Papa in this matter, for my whole heart is set upon it. Harold is in sore need of money, and through no fault of his own." With a woman's tact and eloquence, she told the whole story. "Put yourself in my place, Papa. What is the money to me? I never think of it from year's end to year's end, but now I know how precious it is. I could not have thought that money could be so valuable. See what I can do with it. It may help to save him. I must have it by tomorrow. Oh, do advise me as to what I should do and how I should get the money." The doctor smiled at her eagerness.
"You are as anxious to get rid of money as others are to gain it," said he. "In another case I might think it rash, but I believe in your Harold, and I can see that he has had villainous treatment. You will let me deal with the matter."
"You, Papa?"
"It can be done best between men. Your capital, Clara, is some £5,000, but it is out on a mortgage, and you could not call it in."
Oh, dear, oh, dear."
"But we can still manage. I have as much at my bank. I will advance it to the Denvers as coming from you, and you can repay it to me, or the interest of it, when your money becomes due."
"Oh, that is beautiful. How sweet and kind of you."
"But there is one obstacle. I do not think that you would ever induce Harold to take this money."
Clara's face fell. "Don't you think so, really?"
"I am sure that he would not."
"Then what are you to do? What horrid things money matters are to arrange."
"I shall see his father. We can manage it all between us."
"Oh, do, Papa. And you will do it soon?"
"There is no time like the present. I will go in at once."
He scribbled a check, put it in an envelope, put on his broad straw hat, and strolled in through the garden to pay his morning call. It was a singular sight which met his eyes as he entered the sitting-room of the Admiral. A great sea-chest stood open in the centre, and all round upon the carpet were little piles of jerseys, oilskins, books, sextant boxes, instruments, and sea-boots. The old seaman sat gravely amidst this lumber, turning it over and examining it intently, while his wife, with the tears running silently down her ruddy cheeks, sat upon the sofa, her elbows upon her knees and her chin upon her hands, rocking herself slowly backwards and forwards.
"Hello, Doctor," said the Admiral, holding out his hand. "There's foul weather set in upon us, as you may have heard, but I have ridden out many a worse squall, and, please God, we shall all three of us weather this one also. Those two of us are a little more cranky than we were. My dear friends, I came in to tell you how deeply we sympathize with you all. My girl has only just told me about it."
"It has come so suddenly upon us, Doctor," sobbed Mrs. Hay Denver. "I thought that I had John to myself for the rest of our lives. Heaven knows that we have not seen very much of each other, but now he talks of going to sea again."
Aye, Walker. That's the only way out of it. When I first heard of it, I was thrown up in the wind with all aback. I give you my word that I lost my bearings more completely than ever since I strapped a middy's dirk to my belt. You see, friend, I know something of shipwreck or battle or whatever may come upon the waters, but the shoals in the city of London on which my poor boy has struck are clean beyond me. Pearson had been my pilot there, and now I know him to be a rogue. But I've taken my bearings now, and I see my course right before me." "What then, Admiral?" "Oh, I have one or two little plans. I'll have some news for the boy. Why, hang it, Walker, man, I may be a stiff in the joints, but you'll be my witness that I can do my 12 miles under the 3 hours. What then? My eyes are as good as ever except just for the newspaper. My head is clear. I'm 63, but I'm as good a man as ever I was. Too good a man to lie up for another 10 years. I'd be better the smack of the salt water again, and the whiff of the breeze. Tut, mother, it's not a 4 years' cruise this time. I'll be back every month or two. It's no more than if I went for a visit in the country.
He was talking boisterously and heaping his sea boots and sextants back into his chest.
And you really think, my dear friend, of hoisting your pennant again? My pennant, Walker! No, no. Her Majesty, God bless her, has too many young men to need an old hulk like me. I should be plain Mr. Hay Denver, of the merchant service. I dare say that I might find some owner who would give me a chance as second or third officer. It will be strange to me to feel the rails of the bridge under my fingers once more. Tut, tut! This will never do! This will never do, Admiral!
The doctor sat down by Mrs. Hay Denver and patted her hand in token of friendly sympathy.
We must wait until your son has had it out with all these people, and then we shall know what damage is done, and how best to set it right. It will be time enough then to begin to muster our resources to meet it. Our resources! The Admiral laughed. There's a pension. I'm afraid, Walker, that our resources won't need much mustering. Oh, come. There are some which you may not have thought of. For example, Admiral, I'd always intended that my girl should have 5,000 from me when she married. Of course, your boy's trouble is her trouble, and the money cannot be spent better than in helping to set it right. She has a little of her own which she wished to contribute, but I thought it best to work it this way. Will you take the check, Mr. Denver? And I think it would be best if you said nothing to Harold about it, and just used it as the occasion served. God bless you, Walker, you are a true friend. I won't forget this, Walker.
The Admiral sat down on his sea chest and mopped his brow with his red handkerchief.
What is it to me whether you have it now or then? It may be more useful now. There's only one stipulation. If things should come to the worst, and if the business should prove so bad that nothing can set it right, then hold back this cheque, for there is no use in pouring water into a broken basin, and if the lad should fall, he will want something to pick himself up again with. He shall not fall, Walker, and you shall not have occasion to be ashamed of our family into which your daughter is about to marry. I have my own plan, but we shall hold your money, my friend, and it will strengthen us to feel that it is there. Well, that is all right, said Dr. Walker, rising, and if a little more should be needed, we must not let him go wrong for the want of 1,000 or 2. And now, Admiral, I'm off for my morning walk. Won't you come too? No, I am going into town. Well, goodbye. I hope to have better news and that all will come right. Goodbye, Mrs. Denver. I feel as if the boy were my own, and I shall not be easy until all is right with him.
End of chapter. Read by Fadi Akhtar for Lit2Go on the web at fcit.usf.edu. Beyond the City by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 13. In Strange Waters. When Dr. Walker had departed, the Admiral packed all his possessions back into his sea chest with the exception of one little brass-bound desk. This he unlocked, and took from it a dozen or so blue sheets of paper all mottled over with stamps and seals, with very large VRs printed upon the heads of them. He tied these carefully into a small bundle, and placing them in the inner pocket of his coat, he seized his stick and hat. "Oh, John, don't do this rash thing," cried Mrs. Denver, laying her hands upon his sleeve. "I have seen so little of you, John. Only 3 years since you left the service. Don't leave me again. I know it is weak of me, but I cannot bear it."
"There's my own brave lass," said he, smoothing down the grey shot hair. "We've lived in honour together, mother, and please God in honour we'll die. No matter how debts are made, they have got to be met, and what the boy owes we owe. He has not the money, and how is he to find it? He can't find it. What then? It becomes my business, and there's only one way for it."
"But it may not be so very bad, John. Had we not best wait until after he sees these people tomorrow?"
"They may give him little time, lass. But I'll have a care that I don't go so far that I can't put back again. Now, mother, there's no use holding me. It's got to be done, and there's no sense in shirking it." He detached her fingers from his sleeve, pushed her gently back into an armchair, and hurried from the house. In less than half an hour the Admiral was whirled into Victoria Station, and found himself amid a dense, bustling throng who jostled and pushed in the crowded terminus. His errand, which had seemed feasible enough in his own room, began now to present difficulties in the carrying out, and he puzzled over how he should take the first steps. Amid the stream of businessmen, each hurrying on his definite way, the old seaman in his grey tweed suit and black soft hat strode along slowly, his head sunk and his brow wrinkled in perplexity. Suddenly, an idea occurred to him. He walked back to the railway stall and bought a daily paper. This he turned and turned until a certain column met his eye, when he smoothed it out, and carrying it over to his seat, proceeded to read it at his leisure. And indeed, as a man read that column, it seemed strange to him that there should still remain any one in this world of ours who should be in straits for want of money. Here were whole lines of gentlemen who were burdened with a surplus in their incomes, and who were loudly calling to the poor and needy to come and take it off their hands. Here was the guileless person who was not a professional moneylender, but who would be glad to correspond, etc., etc. Here, too, was the accommodating individual who advanced sums from £10,000 to £10,000 without expense, security, or delay. The money actually paid over within a few hours, ran this fascinating advertisement, conjuring up a vision of swift messengers rushing with bags of gold to the aid of the poor struggler. A third gentleman did all business by personal application, advanced money on anything or nothing. The lightest and airiest promise was enough to content him according to his circular, and finally he never asked for more than 5%. This struck the Admiral as far the most promising, and his wrinkles relaxed, and his frown softened away as he gazed at it. He folded up the paper, rose from the seat, and found himself face to face with Charles Westmacott. "Hello, Admiral!" "Hello, Westmacott." Charles had always been a favourite of the seaman's. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, I have been doing a little business for my aunt, but I have never seen you in London before." "I hate the place. It smothers me. There's not a breath of clean air on this side of Greenwich. But maybe you know your way about pretty well in the city?" "Well, I know something about it. You see, I've never lived very far from it, and I do a good deal of my aunt's business." "Maybe you know Bread Street?" "It is out of Cheapside." "Well then, how do you steer for it from here? You make me come out a course, and I'll keep to it." "Why, Admiral, I have nothing to do. I'll take you there with pleasure." "Will you, though? Well, I'd take it very kindly if you would. I have business there. Smith and Hanbury, financial agents. Bread Street." The pair made their way to the riverside, and so down the Thames to St. Paul's Landing, a mode of travel which was much more to the Admiral's taste than bus or cab. On the way he told his companion his mission and the causes which had led to it. Charles Westmacott knew little enough of city life and the ways of business, but at least he had more experience in both than the Admiral, and he made up his mind not to leave him until the matter was settled. "These are the people," said the Admiral, twisting round his paper and pointing to the advertisement, which had seemed to him the most promising. "It sounds honest and above board, does it not? The personal interview looks as if there were no trickery, and then no one could object to 5%. "No, it seems fair enough. It is not pleasant to have to go hat in hand borrowing money, but there are times, as you may find before you are my age, Westmacott, when a man must stow away his pride. But here's their number, and their plate is on the corner of the door." A narrow entrance was flanked on either side by a row of brasses, ranging upwards from the shipbrokers and the solicitors who occupied the ground floors, through a long succession of West Indian agents, architects, surveyors, and brokers, to the firm of which they were in quest. A winding stone stair, well carpeted and railed at first, but growing shabbier with every landing, brought them past innumerable doors until, at last, just under the ground glass roofing, the names of Smith and Hanbury were to be seen painting in large white letters across a panel, with a laconic invitation to push beneath it. Following out the suggestion, the Admiral and his companion found themselves in a dingy apartment, ill-lit from a couple of glazed windows, an ink-stained table, littered with pens, papers, and almanacs, an American cloth sofa, 3 chairs of varying patterns, and a much-worn carpet constituted all the furniture.
save only a very large and obtrusive porcelain spittoon, and a gaudily framed and very sombre picture which hung above the fireplace. Sitting in front of this picture and staring gloomily at it, as being the only thing which he could stare at, was a small, sallow-faced boy with a large head, who in the intervals of his art studies munched sedately at an apple.
"Is Mr. Smith or Mr. Hanbury in?" asked the Admiral.
"There ain't no such people,"
said the small boy. "But you have the names on the door."
"Ah, that is the name of the firm, you see. It's only a name. It's Mr. Reuben Metaxa that you wants."
"Well, then, is he in?"
"No, he's not."
"When will he be back?"
"Can't tell, I'm sure. He's gone to lunch. Sometimes he takes in 1 hour, sometimes 2. It'll be 2 days, I expect, for he said he was hungry afore he went."
"Then I suppose we had better call again," said the Admiral.
"Not a bit!" cried Charles. "I know how to manage these little imps. See here, you young varmint, here's a shilling for you. Run off and fetch your master. If you don't bring him here in 5 minutes, I'll clump you on the side of your head when you get back. Shoo! Scat!" He charged at the youth, who bolted from the room and clattered madly downstairs. "He'll fetch him," said Charles. "Let us make ourselves at home. This sofa does not feel over and above safe. It was not meant for 15 stone men. But this doesn't look quite the sort of place where one would expect to pick up money."
"Just what I was thinking,"
said the Admiral, looking ruefully about him. "Ah, well, I have heard that the best furnished offices generally belong to the poorest firms. Let us hope it's the opposite here. They can't spend much on the management anyhow. That pumpkin-headed boy was the staff, I suppose. Ah, by Jove, that's his voice. And he's got our man, I think." As he spoke, the youth appeared in the door with a small, brown, dried-up little chip of a man at his heels. He was clean-shaven and blue-chinned, with bristling black hair and keen brown eyes which shone out very brightly from between pouched underlids and drooping upper ones. He advanced, glancing keenly from one to the other of his visitors, and slowly rubbing together his thin, blue-veined hands. The small boy closed the door behind him and discreetly vanished.
"I am Mr. Reuben Metaxa,"
said the money-lender.
"Was it about an advance you wished to see me?"
Yes."
"For you, I presume?"
turning to Charles Westmacott. "No, for this gentleman." The money-lender looked surprised.
"How much did you desire?"
"I thought of £5,000, said the Admiral.
"And what on security?"
"I am a retired Admiral of the British Navy. You will find my name in the Navy list. There is my card. I have here my pension papers. I get £850 a year. I thought that perhaps if you were to hold these papers, it would be security enough that I should pay you. You could draw my pension and repay yourselves at the rate, say, of £500 a year, taking your 5% interest as well."
"What interest?"
5% per annum."
Mr. Metaxa laughed.
"Per annum?"
he said.
5% a month?"
"A month? That would be 60% a year."
"Precisely."
"But that is monstrous."
"I don't ask gentlemen to come to me. They come of their own free will. Those are my terms, and they can take it or leave it."
"Then I shall leave it."
The Admiral rose angrily from his chair.
"But one moment, sir. Just sit down, and we shall chat the matter over. Yours is a rather unusual case, and we may find some other way of doing what you wish. Of course, the security which you offer is no security at all, and no sane man would advance 5,000 pennies on it."
"No security. Why not, sir?"
"You might die tomorrow. You are not a young man. What age are you?"
63.
Mr. Metaxa turned over a long column of figures.
"Here is an actuary's table," said he. "At your time of life, the average expectancy of life is only a few years, even in a well-preserved man."
"Do you mean to insinuate that I am not a well-preserved man?"
"Well, Admiral, it is a trying life at sea. Sailors in their younger days are gay dogs and take it out of themselves. Then when they grow older, they are still hard at it and have no chance of rest or peace. I do not think a sailor's life a good one."
"I'll tell you what, sir," said the Admiral hotly. "If you have 2 pairs of gloves, I'll undertake to knock you out under 3 rounds." or I'll race you from here to St. Paul's, and my friend here will see fair. I'll let you see whether I am an old man or not."
"This is beside the question,"
said the money-lender with a deprecatory shrug.
"The point is that if you died tomorrow, where would be the security then?"
"I could insure my life and make the policy over to you."
"Your premiums for such a sum, if any office would have you, which I very much doubt, would come close to 500 a year. That would hardly suit your book."
"Well, sir, what do you intend to propose?" asked the Admiral.
"I might, to accommodate you, work it in another way. I should send for a medical man and have an opinion upon your life. Then I might see what could be done."
"That is quite fair. I have no objection to that."
"There is a very clever doctor in the street here. Prudy is his name. John. Go and fetch Dr. Prudy."
The youth was dispatched upon his errand, while Mr. Metaxa sat at his desk, trimming his nails and shooting out little comments upon the weather. Presently feet were heard upon the stairs. The money-lender hurried out. There was a sound of whispering, and he returned with a large, fat, greasy-looking man, clad in a much-worn frock coat and very dilapidated top hat.
"Dr. Prudy, gentlemen,"
said Mr. Metaxa. The doctor bowed, smiled, whipped off his hat, and produced his stethoscope from its interior with the air of a conjurer upon the stage.
"Which of these gentlemen am I to examine?"
he asked, blinking from one to the other of them.
"Ah, it is you. Only a waistcoat. You need not undo your collar. Thank you. A full breath. Thank you. 99. Thank you. Now hold your breath for a moment. Oh, dear, dear, what is this I hear?"
"What is it, then?" asked the Admiral, coolly.
"Tut, tut. This is a great pity. Have you had rheumatic fever?"
"Never."
"You have had some serious illness?"
"Never."
"Ah, you are an admiral. You have been abroad, tropics, malaria, ague, I know."
"I have never had a day's illness."
"Not to your knowledge, but you have inhaled unhealthy air, and it has left its effect. You have an organic murmur, slight, but distinct."
"Is it dangerous?"
"It might at any time become so. You should not take violent exercise."
"Oh, indeed. It would hurt me to run half a mile."
"It would be very dangerous."
"And a mile?"
"Would be almost certainly fatal."
"Then there is nothing else the matter?"
"No. But if the heart is weak, then everything is weak, and the life is not a sound one."
"You see, Admiral,"
remarked Mr. Metaxa, as the doctor secreted his stethoscope once more in his hat.
"My remarks were not entirely uncalled for. I am sorry that the doctor's opinion is not more favorable, but this is a matter of business, and certain obvious precautions must be taken."
"Of course. Then the matter's at an end."
"Well, we might even now do business. I am most anxious to be of use to you. How long do you think, Doctor, that this gentleman will in all probability live?"
Well, it's rather a delicate question to answer,"
said Dr. Prudy, with a show of embarrassment. "Not a bit, sir. Out with it. I have faced death too often to flinch from it now, though I saw it as near me as you are."
Well, we must go by averages, of course. Shall we say 2 years? I should think that you have a full 2 years before you."
"In 2 years your pension would bring you in £1,600. I will do my very best for you, Admiral. I will advance you £2,000, and you can make over to me your pension for your life. It is pure speculation on my part. If you die tomorrow, I lose my money. If the doctor's prophecy is correct, I shall still be out of pocket. If you live a little longer, then I may see my money again. It is the very best I can do for you."
"Then you wish to buy my pension?"
"Yes, for 2,000 down."
"And if I live for 20 years?"
"Oh, in that case, of course, my speculation would be more successful. But you have heard the doctor's opinion."
"Would you advance the money instantly?"
"You should have 1,000 at once. The other 1,000 I should expect you to take in furniture."
"In furniture?"
Yes, Admiral, we shall do a beautiful houseful at that sum. It is the custom of my clients to take half in furniture.
The Admiral sat in dire perplexity. He had come out to get money, and to go back without any, to be powerless to help when his boy needed every shilling to save him from disaster, that would be very bitter to him. On the other hand, it was so much that he surrendered, and so little that he received. Little, and yet something. Would it not be better than going back empty-handed? He saw the yellow-backed checkbook upon the table. The moneylender opened it and dipped his pen into the ink.
"Shall I fill it up?"
said he. "I think, Admiral," remarked Westmacott, "that we had better have a little walk and some luncheon before we settle this matter."
"Oh, we may as well do it at once. It would be absurd to postpone it now."
Metaxa spoke with some heat, and his eyes glinted angrily from between his narrow lids at the imperturbable Charles. The Admiral was simple in money matters, but he had seen such of men, and had learned to read them. He saw that venomous glance, and saw too that intense eagerness was peeping out from beneath the careless air which the agent had assumed. "You're quite right, Westmacott," said he. "We'll have a little walk before we settle it."
"But I may not be here this afternoon."
"Then we must choose another day."
"But why not settle it now?"
"Because I prefer not," said the Admiral shortly.
"Very well. But remember that my offer is only for today. It is off, unless you take it at once."
"Let it be off, then."
"There's my fee,"
cried the doctor. "How much?"
"A guinea."
The Admiral threw £1 and a shilling upon the table. "Come, Westmacott," said he, and they walked together from the room. "I don't like it," said Charles, when they found themselves in the street once more. "I don't profess to be a very sharp chap, but this is a trifle too thin. What did he want to go out and speak to the doctor for? And how very convenient this tale of a weak heart was. I believe they are a couple of rogues and in league with each other."
"A shark and a pilot fish,"
said the Admiral. "I'll tell you what I propose, sir. There's a lawyer named McAdam who does my aunt's business. He is a very honest fellow and lives at the other side of Poultry. We'll go over to him together and have his opinion about the whole matter."
"How far is it to the place?"
"Oh, a mile at least. We can have a cab."
"A mile? Then we shall see if there is any truth in what that swab of a doctor said. Come, my boy, and clap on all sail, and see who can say the longest."
Then the sober denizens of the heart of business London saw a singular sight as they returned from their luncheons. Down the roadway, dodging among cabs and carts, ran a weather-stained elderly man, with wide flapping black hat and homely suit of tweeds. With elbows braced back, hands clenched near his armpits, and chest protruded, he scudded along, while close at his heels lumbered a large-limbed, heavy, yellow-mustached young man, who seemed to feel the exercise a good deal more than his senior. On they dashed, helter-skelter, until they pulled up panting at the office where the lawyer of the Westmacotts was to be found.
"There now," cried the Admiral in triumph. "What do you think of that? Nothing wrong in the engine-room, eh?"
"You seem fit enough, sir."
"Blessed if I believe the swab was a certified doctor at all. He was flying false colours, or I am mistaken."
"They keep the directories and registers in this eating-house," said Westmacott. "We'll go and look him out." They did so, but the medical rolls contained no such name as that of Dr. Prudy, of Bread Street.
"Pretty villainy this is," cried the Admiral, thumping his chest. "A dummy doctor and a vamped-up disease. Well, we've tried the rogues, Westmacott. Let us see what we can do with your honest man."
End of chapter. Read by Fadi Akhtar for Lit2Go, on the web at fcit.usf.edu. Beyond the City by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 14. Eastward Ho! Mr. McAdam, of the firm of McAdam and Squire, was a highly polished man who dwelt behind a highly polished table in the neatest and snuggest of offices. He was white-haired and amiable, with a deep-lined aquiline face, was addicted to low brows, and indeed always seemed to carry himself at half-cock, as though just descending into one or just recovering himself.
He wore a high-buckled stock, took snuff, and adorned his conversation with little scraps from the classics.
"My dear sir," said he, when they had listened to their story, "any friend of Mrs. Westmacott is a friend of mine. Try a pinch. I wonder that you should have gone to this man Metaxa. His advertisement is enough to condemn him. Habet foenum incornu, they are all rogues. The doctor was a rogue, too. I didn't like the look of him at the time. Arcades ambo. But now we must see what can do for you. Of course, what Metaxa said was perfectly right. The pension is in itself no security at all, unless it were accompanied by life assurance, which would be an income in itself. It is no good whatever."
His clients' faces fell.
"But there is a second alternative. You might sell the pension right out. Speculative investors occasionally deal in such things. I have one client, a sporting man, who would be very likely to take it up if we could agree upon terms. Of course, I must follow Metaxa's example by sending for a doctor."
For the second time was the Admiral punched and tapped and listened to. This time, however, there could be no question of the qualifications of the doctor, a well-known fellow of the College of Surgeons, and his report was as favorable as the others had been adverse.
"He has the heart and chest of a man of 40, said he. "I can recommend his life as one of the best of his age that I have ever examined."
"That's well," said Mr. McAdam, making a note of the doctor's remarks, while the Admiral disbursed a second guinea. "Your price, I understand, is £5,000. I can communicate with Mr. Elberry, my client, and let you know whether he cares to touch the matter. Meanwhile, you can leave your pension papers here, and I will give you a receipt for them."
"Very well. I should like the money soon."
"That is why I am retaining the papers. If I can see Mr. Elberry today, we may let you have a cheque tomorrow. Try another pinch. No. Well, goodbye. I am very happy to have been of service." Mr. McAdam bowed them out, for he was a very busy man, and they found themselves in the street once more with lighter hearts than when they had left it.
"Well, Westmacott, I am sure I have very much obliged to you," said the Admiral. "You have stood by me when I was the better for a little help, for I'm clean out of my soundings among these city sharks. But I have something to do now which is more in my own line, and I need not trouble you any more."
"Oh, it is no trouble. I have nothing to do. I never have anything to do. I don't suppose I could do it if I had. I should be delighted to come with you, sir, if I can be of any use."
"No, no, my lad. You can go home again. It would be kind of you, though, if you would look in at number 1 when you get back and tell my wife that's all well with me, and that I'll be back in an hour or so."
"All right, sir. I'll tell her."
Westmacott raised his hat and strode away to the westward, while the Admiral, after a hurried lunch, bent his steps toward the east. It was a long walk, but the old seaman swung along at a rousing pace, leaving street after street behind him. The great business places dwindled down into commonplace shops and dwellings, which decreased and became more stunted, even as the folk who filled them did, until he was deep in the evil places of the eastern end. It was a land of huge, dark houses and of garish gin shops, a land, too, where life moves irregularly and where adventures are to be gained, as the Admiral was to learn to his cost. He was hurrying down one of the long, narrow, stone-flagged lanes between the double lines of crouching, disheveled women and of dirty children who sat on the hollowed steps of the houses and basked in the autumn sun. At one side was a barrowman with a load of walnuts, and beside the barrow a bedraggled woman with a black fringe and a checkered shawl thrown over her head. She was cracking walnuts and picking them out of the shells, throwing out a remark occasionally to a rough man in a rabbit-skin cap, with straps under the knees of his corduroy trousers, who stood puffing a black clay pipe with his back against a wall. What the cause of the quarrel was, or what sharp sarcasm from the woman's lips pricked suddenly through that thick skin, may never be known. But suddenly the man took his pipe in his left hand, leaned forward, and deliberately struck her across the face with his right. It was a slap rather than a blow, but the woman gave a sharp cry and cowered up against the barrow with her hand to her cheek.
"You infernal villain!"
cried the Admiral, raising his stick.
"You brute and blackguard! Gone!" growled the rough with the deep rasping intonation of a savage. "Down out of this, or I'll—" He took a step forward with uplifted hand, but in an instant down came cut number 3 upon his wrist, and cut number 5 across his thigh, and cut number 1 full in the center of his rapid skin cap. It was not a heavy stick, but it was strong enough to leave a good red wheal wherever it fell. The rough yelled with pain and rushed in, hitting with both hands and kicking with his iron-shod boots, but the Admiral had still a quick foot and a true eye, so that he bounded backwards and sideways, still raining a shower of blows upon this savage antagonist. Suddenly, however, a pair of arms closed round his neck, and glancing backwards he caught a glimpse of the black coarse fringe of the woman whom he had befriended. "I've got him!" she shrieked. "I'll hold him now! Bill knock the tripe out of him!" Her grip was as strong as man's, and her wrist pressed like an iron bar upon the Admiral's throat. He made a desperate effort to disengage himself, but the most that he could do was to swing her round so as to place her between his adversary and himself. As it proved, it was the very best thing that he could have done. The rough, half blinded and maddened by the blows which he had received, struck out with all his ungainly strength, just as his partner's head swung round in front of him. There was a noise like that of a stone hitting a wall, a deep groan, her grasp relaxed, and she dropped a dead weight upon the pavement, while the Admiral sprang back and raised his stick once more, ready either for attack or defense. Neither were needed, however, for at that moment there was a scattering of the crowd, and 2 police constables, burly and helmeted, pushed their way through the rabble. At the sight of them, the rough took to his heels, and was instantly screened from view by a veil of his friends and neighbors. "I have been assaulted," panted the Admiral. "This woman was attacked, and I had to defend her." "This is Bermondsey's Hal," said one police officer, bending over the bedraggled heap of tattered shawl and dirty skirt. "She's got it hot this time." "He was a shortish man, thick, with a beard." "Ah, that's Black Davy. He's been a 4 times for beating her. He's about done the job now. If I were you, I would let that sort of settle their own little affairs." "Do you think that a man who holds the Queen's commission will stand by and see a woman struck?" cried the Admiral indignantly. "Well, just as you like, sir, but you've lost your watch, I see." "My watch!" He clapped his hand to his waistcoat. The chain was hanging down in front, and the watch was gone. He passed his hand over his forehead. "I would not have lost that watch for anything," said he. "No money could replace it. It was given me by the ship's company after our African cruise. It has an inscription." The policeman shrugged his shoulders. "It comes from meddling," said he.
"What'll you give me if I tell her where it is?"
said a sharp-faced boy among the crowd.
"Will you give me a quid?"
"Certainly."
"Well, where's the quid?"
The Admiral took a sovereign from his pocket. "Here it is."
"Then here's the ticker."
The boy pointed to the clenched hand of the senseless woman. A glimmer of gold shone out from between the fingers, and in opening them up, there was the Admiral's chronometer. This interesting victim had throttled her protector with one hand, while she had robbed him with the other. The Admiral left his address with the policeman, satisfied that the woman was only stunned, not dead, and then set off upon his way once more, the poorer perhaps in his faith in human nature, but in very good spirits none the less. He walked with dilated nostrils and clenched hands, all glowing and tingling with the excitement of the combat, and warmed with the thought that he could still, when there was need, take his own part in a street brawl in spite of his 80 years. His way now led towards the riverside regions, and a cleansing whiff of tar was to be detected in the stagnant autumn air. Men with the blue jersey and peaked cap of the boatmen, or the white ducks of the dockers, began to replace the corduroys and fustian of the labourers. Shops with nautical instruments in the windows, rope and paint sellers, and slop shops with long rows of oilskins dangling from hooks, all proclaimed the neighbourhood of the docks. The Admiral quickened his pace and straightened his figure as his surroundings became more nautical, until at last, peeping between 2 high dingy wharfs, he caught a glimpse of the mud-coloured waters of the Thames, and of the bristle of masts and funnels which rose from its broad bosom. To the right lay a quiet street, with many brass plates upon either side, and wire blinds in all the windows. The Admiral walked slowly down it until the St. Lawrence Shipping Company caught his eye.
He crossed the road, pushed open the door, and found himself in a low-ceilinged office, with a long counter at one end, and a great number of wooden sections of ships stuck upon boards and plastered all over the walls.
"Is Mr. Henry in?"
asked the Admiral.
"No, sir,"
answered an elderly man from a high seat in the corner.
"he has not come into town today. I can manage any business you may wish seen to."
"You don't happen to have a first or second officer's place vacant, do you?"
The manager looked with a dubious eye at his singular applicant.
"Do you hold certificates?"
he asked.
"I hold every nautical certificate there is."
"Then you won't do for us."
"Why not?"
"Your age, sir."
"I give you my word that I can see as well as ever, and am as good a man in every way."
"I don't doubt it."
"Why should my age be a bar, then?"
"Well, I must put it plainly. If a man of your age holding certificates has not got past a second officer's berth, there must be a black mark against him somewhere. I don't know what it is, drink or temper or want of judgment. But something must be there."
"I assure you there is nothing. But I find myself stranded, and so have to turn to the old business again."
"Oh, that's it,"
said the manager, with suspicion in his eye.
"How long were you in your last billet?"
51 years.
"What?"
"Yes, sir. 51 years."
"In the same employ?"
"Yes."
"Why, you must have begun as a child."
"I was 12 when I joined."
"It must be a strangely managed business,"
said the manager,
"which allows men to leave it who have served for 50 years and who are still as good as ever. Who did you serve?"
"The Queen, heaven bless her."
"Oh, you were in the Royal Navy. What rating did you hold?"
"I am Admiral of the Fleet."
The manager started and sprang down from his high stool.
"My name is Admiral Hay Denver. There is my card, and here are the records of my service. I don't, you understand, want to push another man from his billet, but if you should chance to have a berth open, I should be very glad of it. I know the navigation from the Cod Banks right up to Montreal, and a great better than I know the streets of London."
The astonished manager glanced over the blue papers which his visitor had handed him.
"Won't you take a chair, Admiral?"
said he.
"Thank you, but I should be obliged if you would drop my little title now. I told you because you asked me, but I've left the quarter-deck, and I am plain Mr. Hay Denver now."
"May I ask," said the manager, "are you the same Denver who commanded at one time on the North American station?"
"I did."
"Then it was you who got one of our boats, the Comus, off the rocks in the Bay of Fundy. The directors voted you 300 guineas at salvage, and you refused them."
"It was an offer which should not have been made,"
said the Admiral sternly.
"Well, it reflects credit upon you that you should think so. If Mr. Henry were here, I am sure that he would arrange this matter for you at once. As it is, I shall lay it before the directors today, and I am sure that they will be proud to have you in our employment, and I hope in some more suitable position than that which you suggest."
"I am very much obliged to you, sir,"
said the Admiral, and started off again, well pleased, upon his homeward journey. End of chapter. Read by Fadi Akhtar for Lit2Go on the web at fcit.usf.edu. Beyond the City by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 15, Still Among Shoals. Next day brought the Admiral a cheque for £5,000 from Mr. McAdam, and a stamped agreement by which he made over his pension papers to the speculative investor. It was not until he had signed and sent it off that the full significance of all that he had done broke upon him. He had sacrificed everything. His pension was gone. He had nothing save only what he could earn. But the stout old heart never quailed. He waited eagerly for a letter from the St. Lawrence Shipping Company, and in the meanwhile he gave his landlord a quarter's notice. £100-a-year houses would in future be a luxury which he could not aspire to. A small lodging in some inexpensive part of London must be the substitute for his breezy Norwood villa. So be it, then. Better that 1,000-fold than that his name should be associated with failure and disgrace.
On that morning, Harold Denver was to meet the creditors of the firm and to explain the situation to them. It was a hateful task, a degrading task, but he set himself to do it with quiet resolution. At home, they waited in intense anxiety to learn the result of the meeting. It was late before he returned, haggard, pale, like a man who has done and suffered much. "What's this board in front of the house?" he asked.
"We are going to try a little change of scene," said the Admiral. "This place is neither town nor country, but never mind that, boy. Tell us what happened in the city."
"God help me. My wretched business driving you out of house and home," cried Harold, broken down by this fresh evidence of the effects of his misfortunes. "It is easier for me to meet my creditors than to see you two suffering so patiently for my sake."
"Tut, tut!" cried the Admiral. "There's no suffering in the matter. Mother would rather be near the theatres. That's at the bottom of it, isn't it, Mother? You come and sit down here between us and tell us all about it."
Harold sat down with a loving hand in each of his. "It's not so bad as we thought," said he, "and yet it is bad enough. I have about 10 days to find the money, but I don't know which way to turn for it. Pearson, however, lied as usual when he spoke of £13,000. The amount is not quite £7,000. The Admiral clapped his hands.
"I knew we would weather it after all. Hurrah, my boy! Hip, hip, hurrah!"
Harold gazed at him in surprise, while the old seaman waved his arm above his head and bellowed out 3 stentorian cheers. "Where am I to get £7,000 from, Dad?" he asked.
"Never mind. You spin your yarn."
"Well, they were very good and very kind, but of course they must have either their money or their money's worth. They passed a vote of sympathy with me, and agreed to wait 10 days before they took any proceedings. 3 of them, whose claim came to £3,500, told me that if I would give them my personal IOU and pay interest at the rate of 5%, their amounts might stand over as long as I wished. That would be a charge of £175 upon my income, but with economy I could meet it. And it diminishes the debt by 1/2. Again the Admiral burst out cheering. "There remains, therefore, about £3,200, which has to be found within 10 days. No man shall lose by me. I gave them my word in the room that if I worked my soul out of my body, every one of them should be paid. I shall not spend a penny upon myself until it is done. But some of them can't wait. They are poor men themselves and must have their money. They have issued a warrant for Pearson's arrest, but they think that he has got away the States."
"These men shall have their money," said the Admiral.
"Dad!"
"Yes, my boy. You don't know the resources of the family. One never does know until one tries. What have you yourself now?"
"I have about £1,000 invested."
"All right. And I have about as much more. There's a good start. Now, Mother, it is your turn. What is that little bit of paper of yours?"
Mrs. Denver unfolded it and placed it upon Harold's knee. £5,000! he gasped.
"Ah, but Mother is not the only rich one. Look at this."
And the Admiral unfolded his cheque and placed it upon the other knee. Harold gazed from one to the other in bewilderment. £10,000! he cried. "Good heavens, where did these come from?" "You will not worry any longer, dear," murmured his mother, slipping her arm round him. But his quick eye had caught the signature upon one of the cheques. "Dr. Walker!" he cried, flushing. "This is Clara's doing. Oh, Dad, we cannot take this money. It would not be right, nor honourable."
"No, boy. I am glad you think so. It is something, however, to have proved one's friend, for a real good friend he is. It was he who brought it in, though Clara sent him, but this other money will be enough to cover everything. And it is all my own."
"Your own? Where did you get it, Dad?"
"Tut, tut! See what it is to have a city man to deal with. It is my own, and fairly earned, and that is enough."
"Dear old Dad!" Harold squeezed his gnarled hand. "And you, Mother! You have lifted the trouble from my heart. I feel another man. You have saved my honour, my good name, everything. I cannot owe you more, for I owe you everything already." So while the autumn sunset shone ruddily through the broad window, these 3 sat together hand in hand, with hearts which were too full to speak. Suddenly, the soft thudding of tennis balls was heard, and Mrs. Westmacott bounded into view upon the lawn with brandished racket and short skirts fluttering in the breeze. The sight came as a relief to their strained nerves, and they burst all 3 into a hearty fit of laughter. "She's playing with her nephew," said Harold at last. "The Walkers have not come out yet. I think that it would be well if you were to give me that check, Mother, and I were to return it in person." "Certainly, Harold. I think it would be very nice." He went in through the garden. Clara and the doctor were sitting together in the dining room. She sprang to her feet at the sight of him.
"Oh, Harold, I've been waiting for you impatiently," she cried. "I saw you pass the front windows half an hour ago. I would have come in if I dared. Do tell us what happened."
"I have come in to thank you both. How can I repay you for your kindness? Here is your check, Doctor. I have not needed it. I find that I can lay my hands on enough to pay my creditors."
"Thank God!"
said Clara fervently. "The sum is less than I thought, and our resources considerably more. We have been able to do it with ease."
With ease.
The doctor's brow clouded and his manner grew cold.
I think, Harold, that you would better do to take this money of mine than to use that which seems to you to be gained with ease.
"Thank you, sir. If I borrowed from anyone, it would be from you. But my father has this very sum, £5,000, and, as I tell him, I owe him so much that I have no compunction about owing him more."
No compunction. Surely there are some sacrifices which a son should not allow his parents to make.
"Sacrifices? What do you mean?"
Is it possible that you do not know how this money has been obtained?
"I give you my word, Dr. Walker, that I have no idea. I asked my father, but he refused to tell me."
I thought not,
said the doctor, the gloom clearing from his brow.
I was sure that you were not a man who, to clear yourself from a little money difficulty, would sacrifice the happiness of your mother and the health of your father.
"Good gracious! What do you mean?"
It is only right that you should know. That money represents the commutation of your father's pension. He has reduced himself to poverty and intends to go to sea again to earn a living."
"To sea again? Impossible."
"It is the truth. Charles Westmacott has told Ida. He was with him in the city when he took his poor pension about from dealer to dealer trying to sell it. He succeeded at last, and hence the money."
"He has sold his pension!" cried Harold, with his hands to his face. "My dear old dad has sold his pension!" He rushed from the room and burst wildly into the presence of his parents once more. "I cannot take it, father!" he cried. "Better bankruptcy than that! Oh, if I had only known your plan! We must have back the pension! Oh, mother, mother, how could you think me capable of such selfishness? Give me the check, Dad, and I will see this man tonight, for I would sooner die like a dog in the ditch than touch a penny of this money." End of chapter. Read by Fadi Akhtar for Lit2Go, found at the web at fcit.usf.edu. Beyond the City by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 16. A Midnight Visitor. Now all this time, while the tragicomedy of life was being played in these three suburban villas, while on a commonplace stage love and humor and fears and lights and shadows were so swiftly succeeding each other, and while these three families, drifted together by fate, were shaping each other's destinies and working out in their own fashion the strange, intricate ends of human life, there were human eyes which watched over every stage of the performance, and which were keenly critical of every actor on it. Across the road, beyond the green palings and the close-cropped lawn, behind the curtains of their creeper-framed window sat the two old ladies, Miss Bertha and Miss Monica Williams, looking out as from a private box at all that was being enacted before them. The growing friendship of the three families, the engagement of Harold Denver with Clara Walker, the engagement of Charles Westmacott with her sister, the dangerous fascination which the widow exercised over the doctor, the preposterous behavior of the Walker girls, and the unhappiness which they had caused their father, not one of these incidents escaped the notice of the two maiden ladies. Bertha, the younger, had a smile or a sigh for the lovers. Monica, the elder, a frown or a shrug for the elders. Every night they talked over what they had seen, and their own dull, uneventful life took a warmth and a coloring from their neighbors as a blank wall reflects a beacon fire. And now it was destined that they should experience the one keen sensation of their later years, the one memorable incident from which all future incidents should be dated. It was on the very night which succeeded the events which have just been narrated, when suddenly, into Monica Williams' head, As she tossed upon her sleepless bed, there shot a thought which made her sit up with a thrill and a gasp. "Bertha," said she, plucking at the shoulder of her sister, "I have left the front window open." "No, Monica, surely not." Bertha sat up also, and thrilled in sympathy. "I am sure of it. You remember I had forgotten to water the pots, and then I opened the window when Jane called me about the jam, and I have never been in the room since. Good gracious, Monica! It is a mercy that we have not been murdered in our beds. There was a house broken into at Forest Hill last week. Shall we go down and shut it?" "I dare not go down alone, dear. But if you will come with me, put on your slippers and dressing gown. We do not need a candle. Now, Bertha, we will go down together." Two little white patches moved vaguely through the darkness. The stairs creaked, the door whined, and they were at the front room window. Monica closed it gently and fastened the snib. "What a beautiful moon!" said she, looking out. "We can see as clearly as if it were day. How peaceful and quiet the three houses are over yonder! It seems quite sad to see that to let card upon number 1. I wonder how number 2 will like their going. For my part, I could better spare that dreadful woman at number 3 with her short skirts and her snake. But, oh, Bertha, look! Look, look!" Her voice had fallen suddenly to a quivering whisper, and she was pointing to the Westmacott's house. Her sister gave a gasp of horror, and stood with a clutch at Monica's arm, staring in the same direction. There was a light in the front room, a slight wavering light, such as would be given by a small candle or taper. The blind was down, but the light shone dimly through. Outside in the garden, with his figure outlined against a luminous square, there stood a man, his back to the road, his 2 hands upon the window ledge, and his body rather bent as though he were trying to peep in past the blind. So absolutely still and motionless was he that, in spite of the moon, they might well have overlooked him were it not for the tell-tale light behind. "Good heaven!" gasped Bertha. "It is a burglar!" But her sister set her mouth grimly and shook her head. "We shall see," she whispered. "It may be something worse." Swiftly and furtively the man stood suddenly erect and began to push the window slowly up. Then he put one knee upon the sash, glanced round to see that all was safe, and climbed over into the room. As he did so, he had to push the blind aside. Then the 2 spectators saw where the light came from. Mrs. Westmacott was standing, as rigid as a statue, in the center of the room, with a lighted taper in her right hand. For an instant they caught a glimpse of her stern face and her white collar. Then the blind fell back into position, and the 2 figures disappeared from their view. "Oh, the dreadful woman!" cried Monica. "The dreadful, dreadful woman! She was waiting for him! You saw it with your own eyes, Sister Bertha!" "Hush, hush, dear! Hush, listen!" said her more charitable companion. They pushed their own window open once more, and watched from behind the curtains. For a long time all was silent within the house. The light still stood motionless, as though Mrs. Westmacott remained rigidly in the one position, while from time to time a shadow passed in front of it to show that her midnight visitor was pacing up and down in front of her. Once they saw his outline clearly, with his hands outstretched as if in appeal or entreaty. Then suddenly there was a dull sound, a cry, the noise of a fall, the taper was extinguished, and a dark figure fled in the moonlight, rushed across the garden, and vanished amid the shrubs at the farther side. Then only did the 2 old ladies understand that they had looked on whilst a tragedy had been enacted. "Help!" they cried, and "Help!" in their high, thin voices, timidly at first, but gathering volume as they went on, until the wilderness rang with their shrieks. Lights shone in all the windows opposite, chains rattled, bars were unshot, doors opened, and out rushed friends to the rescue, Harold with a stick, the Admiral with a sword, his grey head and bare feet protruding from either end of a long brown ulster. Finally, Dr. Walker with a poker. All ran to the help of the Westmacotts. Their door had been already opened, and they crowded tumultuously into the front room. Charles Westmacott, white to his lips, was kneeling on the floor, supporting his aunt's head upon his knee. She lay outstretched, dressed in her ordinary clothes, the extinguished taper still grasped in her hand, no mark or wound upon her, pale, placid, and senseless.
"Thank God you are come, doctor," said Charles, looking up. "Do tell me how she is and what I should do."
Dr. Walker kneeled beside her and passed his left hand over her head, while he grasped her pulse with the right.
"She has had a terrible blow," said he. "It must have been with some blunt weapon. Here is the place behind the ear. But she is a woman of extraordinary physical powers. Her pulse is full and slow. There is no stir to her. It is my belief that she is merely stunned, and that she is in no danger at all."
"Thank God for that!"
"We must get her to bed. We shall carry her upstairs, and then I shall send my girls into her. But who has done this?"
"Some robber," said Charles. "You see that the window is open. She must have heard him and come down, for she was already perfectly fearless. I wish to goodness she had called me."
"But she was dressed."
"Sometimes she sits up very late." "I did sit up very late," said the voice. She had opened her eyes and was blinking at them in the lamplight. "A villain came in through the window and struck me with a life-preserver. You can tell the police so when they come. Also that it was a little fat man. Now, Charles, give me your arm and I shall go upstairs." But her spirit was greater than her strength, for as she staggered to her feet, her head swam round, and she would have fallen again had her nephew not thrown his arms round her. They carried her upstairs among them and laid her upon the bed, where the doctor watched beside her, while Charles went off to the police station, and the Denvers mounted guard over the frightened maids. End of chapter. Read by Fadi Akhtar for Lit2Go, found on the web at fcit.usf.edu. Beyond the City by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 17. In Port at Last. Day had broken before the several denizens of the wilderness had all returned to their homes. The police finished their inquiries, and all come back to its normal quiet. Mrs. Westmacott had been left sleeping peacefully with a small chloral draught to steady her nerves, and a handkerchief soaked in arnica bound round her head. It was with some surprise, therefore, that the Admiral received a note from her about 10 o'clock, asking him to be good enough to step in to her. He hurried in, fearing that she might have taken some turn for the worse, but he was reassured to find her sitting up in her bed, with Clara and Ida Walker in attendance upon her. She had removed the handkerchief, and had put on a little cap with pink ribbons, and a maroon dressing jacket, daintily fulled the neck and sleeves. "My dear friend," said she, as he entered, "I wish to make a last few remarks to you. No, no," she continued, laughing as she saw a look of dismay upon his face. "I shall not dream of dying for at least another 30 years. A woman should be ashamed to die before she is 70. I wish, Clara, that you would ask your father to step up. And you, Ida, just pass me my cigarettes and open me a bottle of stout. Now then," she continued, as the doctor joined their party, "I don't quite know what I ought to say to you, Admiral. You want some very plain speaking to."
"Pardon my word, ma'am. I don't know what you are talking about."
"The idea of you at your age talking of going to sea, and leaving that dear patient little wife of yours at home, who has seen nothing of you all her life. It's all very well for you. You have the life, and the change, and the excitement, but you don't think of her eating her heart out in a dreary London lodging. Oh, you men are all the same."
"Well, ma'am, since you know so much, you probably know also that I have sold my pension. How am I to live if I do not turn my hand to work?"
Mrs. Westmacott produced a large registered envelope from beneath the sheets, and tossed it over to the old seaman.
"That excuse won't do. There are your pension papers. Just see if they are right."
He broke the seal, and out tumbled the very papers which he had made over to McAdam 2 days before.
"But what am I to do with these now?"
he cried in bewilderment.
"You will put them in a safe place, or get a friend to do so, and if you do your duty, you will go to your wife and beg her pardon for having even for an instant thought of leaving her."
The Admiral passed his hand over his rugged forehead.
"This is very good of you, ma'am," said he. "Very good and kind, and I know that you are a staunch friend. But for all that these papers mean money, and though we may have been broken in water lately, we are not quite in such straits as to have to signal to our friends. When we do, ma'am, there is no one we would look to sooner than to you."
"Don't be ridiculous," said the widow. "You know nothing whatever about it, and yet you stand there laying down the law. I'll have my way in the matter, and you shall take the papers, for it is no favour that I am doing you, but simply a restoration of stolen property." "How's that, ma'am?" "I am just going to explain, though you might take a lady's word for it without asking questions. Now, what I am going to say is just between you four, and must go no farther. I have my own reasons for wishing to keep it from the police. Who do you think it was who struck me last night, Admiral?" "Some villain, ma'am. I don't know his name." "But I do. It was the same man who ruined or tried to ruin your son. It was my only brother, Jeremiah."
"Ah!"
"I will tell you about him, or a little about him, for he has done much which I would not care to talk of, nor you to listen to. He was always a villain, smooth-spoken and plausible, but a dangerous, subtle villain all the same. If I've some hard thoughts about mankind, I can trace them back to the childhood which I spent with my brother. He is my only living relative, for my other brother, Charles's father, was killed in the Indian Mutiny. Our father was rich, and when he died he made a good provision both for Jeremiah and for me. He knew Jeremiah and has mistrusted him, however. So instead of giving him all that he meant him to have, he handed me over a part of it, telling me, with what was almost his dying breath, to hold it in trust for my brother, and to use it in behalf when he should have squandered or lost all that he had. This arrangement was meant to be a secret between my father and myself, but unfortunately his words were overheard by the nurse, and she repeated them afterwards to my brother, so that he came to know that I held some money in trust for him. I suppose tobacco will not harm my head, doctor. Thank you. Then I shall trouble you for the matches, Ida." She lit a cigarette, and leaned back upon the pillow, with the blue wreaths curling from her lips. "I cannot tell you how often he has attempted to get that money from me. Oh, he has bullied, cajoled, threatened, coaxed, done all that a man could do. I still held it with the presentiment that a need for it would come. When I heard of this villainous business, his flight, and his leaving his partner to face the storm, above all that my old friend had been driven to surrender his income in order to make up for my brother's defalcations, I felt that now indeed I had a need for it. I sent in Charles yesterday to Mr. McAdam, and his client, upon hearing the facts of the case, very graciously consented to give back the papers, and to take the money which he had advanced. Not a word of thanks to me, Admiral. I tell you that it was very cheap benevolence, for it was all done with his own money. And how could I use it better? I thought that I should probably hear from him soon, and I did. Last evening there was handed in a note of the usual whining, cringing tone. He had come back from abroad at the risk of his life and liberty, just in order that he might say goodbye to the only sister he ever had, and to entreat my forgiveness for any pain which he had caused me. He would never trouble me again, and he begged only that I would hand over to him the sum which I held in trust for him. That, with what he had already, would be enough to start him as an honest man in the new world, when he would ever remember and pray for the dear sister who had been his saviour. That was the style of the letter, and it ended by imploring me to leave the window latch open, and to be in the front room at 3 a.m, when he would come to receive my last kiss, and to bid me farewell. Bad as he was, I could not, when he trusted me, betray him. I said nothing, but I was there at the hour. He entered through the window and implored me to give him the money. He was terribly changed, gaunt, wolfish, spoke like a madman. I told him that I had spent the money. He gnashed his teeth at me and swore it was his money. I told him that I had spent it on him. He asked me how. I said in trying to make him an honest man, and in repairing the result of his villainy. He shrieked out a curse, and pulling something out of the breast of his coat, a loaded stick, I think, he struck me with it, and I remember nothing more.
"The blackguard!" cried the doctor. "But the police must be hot upon his track."
"I fancy not," Mrs. Westmacott answered calmly, "as my brother is a particularly tall, thin man, and as the police are looking for a short, fat one, I do not think that it is very probable that they will catch him. It is best, I think, that these little family matters should be adjusted in private."
"My dear ma'am," said the Admiral, If it is indeed this man's money that has bought back my pension, then I can have no scruples about taking it. You have brought sunshine upon us, ma'am, when the clouds were at their darkest. For here is my boy who insists upon returning the money which I got. He can keep it now to pay his debts. For what you have done, I can only ask God to bless you, ma'am. And as to thanking you, I can't even—
Then don't try, please, said the widow. Now run away, Admiral, and make your peace with Mrs. Denver. I am sure if I were she, it would be a long time before I should forgive you. As for me, I am going to America when Charles goes. You'll take me so far, won't you, Ida? There is a college being built in Denver which is to equip the woman of the future for the struggle of life, and especially for her battle against man. Some months ago, the committee offered me a responsible situation upon the staff, and I have decided now to accept it, for Charles's marriage removes the last tie which binds me to England. You will write to me sometimes, my friends, and you will address your letters to Professor Westmacott, Emancipation College, Denver. From there, I shall watch how the glorious struggle goes in conservative old England, and if I am needed, you will find me here again, fighting in the forefront of the fray. Goodbye, but not you, girls. I have still a word I wish to say to you. Give me your hand, Ida, and yours, Clara, said she when they were alone. Oh, you naughty little pusses, aren't you ashamed to look me in the face? Did you really think that I was so very blind and could not see your little plot? You did it very well, I must say that, and really I think that I like you better as you are. But you had all your pains for nothing, you little conspirators, for I give you my word that I quite made up my mind not to have him. And so, within a few weeks, our little ladies from their observatory saw a mighty bustle in the wilderness, when 2 horse carriages came and coachmen with favours, to bear away the 2s who were destined to come back 1. And they themselves in their crackling silk dresses went across, as invited to the big double wedding breakfast which was held in the house of Dr. Walker. Then there was health drinking and laughter and changing of dresses and rice throwing when the carriages drove up again, and 2 more couples started on that journey which ends only with life itself. Charles Westmacott is now a flourishing ranchman in the western part of Texas, where he and his sweet little wife are the 2 most popular persons in all that county. Of their aunt they see little, but from time to time they see notices in the papers that there is a focus of light in Denver, where mighty thunderbolts are being forged which will one day bring the dominant sex upon their knees. The Admiral and his wife still live at number 1, while Harold and Clara have taken number 2, where Dr. Walker continues to reside. As to the business, it had been reconstructed, and the energy and ability of the junior partner had soon made up for all the ill that had been done by his senior. Yet with his sweet and refined home atmosphere he is able to realize his wish, and to keep himself free from the sordid aims and base ambitions which drag down the man whose business lies too exclusively in the money market of the vast Babylon. As he goes back every evening from the crowds of Throgmorton Street to the tree-lined peaceful avenues of Norwood, so he has found it possible in spirit also to do one's duties amidst the babble of the city, and yet to live beyond it. The End. Recorded by Fadi Akhtar for Lit2Go, on the web at fcit.usf.edu.